Hello friends, welcome back to the channel. Today on Lee's Bicycles, we're going to be building a Jamis Boss Cruiser 7-speed. This one is 18-inch and it's in raspberry. Should be pretty simple to get through. We're going to go through this one and possibly a couple others. We've been building bikes all night long because that's what we do here. We are back in the home shop. Usually we're at, the actual shop at 1101 North Federal Highway in Hollywood, Florida. If you'd like to come in and see some of the bikes that we've built here on the channel, that's the place to do it. So the first thing that we're going to do is with our sharp utility knife, we're going to cut right down the side of the box. We like to be away from the opening of the flap just because it's a nice even seam to cut by, and we'll get the bike out of the box from there. Make sure you stay at the edge of the box so that you don't slice into one of the tires or some of the other, you don't want to scratch the frame. And we have our seat. And we have our parts box. So from here, we're going to cut the zip ties that hold the wheel onto the frame. We're going to take the wheel off. We're going to grease the seat tube. We're going to grease the head tube so that we can put the stem in it. We're going to make sure that our seat is already on the seat post. We're going to put our seat post into the clamp and size it so that we don't have to wrestle adjusting the clamp while we're putting the bike up in there. And then we'll go through the unpacking process. We'll do it fast forward like always. And we'll get this bike assembled and ready. So let's cut our wheel loose from the frame, cut the zip ties. Our cardboard goes back in the cardboard. Our plastic and styrofoam goes into our recycle bag. Take the protective plastics off. We are going to inflate the tire. These do go to 60 PSI. That way we can expand the rim so that we have proper braking surface. Otherwise we're going to end up adjusting our brakes too tight. We have our seat post. We're going to carefully cut the box away from the seat. We don't want to cut the material. And while we're at it, we might as well get into our parts box. We have our pedals. We have our stem. We have our reflectors. And we have our owner's manual. So we're going to take our seat post. With a 6mm Allen, we're going to loosen up the bolt so that we can turn half of the bale, get it down onto the rails, turn it back, leave it at a little bit of an angle, maybe not quite so severe. These are micro adjust. And just snug it up so that it holds in place. That way, when it goes into the bike, it's relatively at the right angle and it's not going to move. So let's get it into the bike. So with our assembler's grease, we're going to make sure that we put a good coat of grease inside the seat tube and inside the head tube. That way nothing will bind later on down the road, especially if this is going to be stored outside. We've already sized our clamp to the seat post. Now we're going to get it down into the frame, leaving enough for the clamp and the reflector, 6mm. It doesn't matter if this is straight or not, as long as it's firmly in the frame, because this is going to be supporting the entire weight of the bike. So now we put the bike up into our clamp, and then we'll go through the unpacking process. All right, So now let's go through the unpacking process. We'll do this fast forward so that you guys don't have to sit through it all. And then when we come back out on the other side, we'll start the actual assembly. Let's get started. All right, so now we've gotten everything off the bike that doesn't need to be there. Make sure she pedals around, because when we put the pedals in, we want to be able to pedal backwards and not have the chain get all confuncted. We're going to put the stem in. There is a minimum insertion line on here. Make sure that you go below that at least a little bit. Try to eyeball it to get it somewhat straight. We're just going to snug up on the holding bolt because we don't have final adjustment yet. We're going to take the cap off the stem. We're going to take our handlebar. We're going to make sure that our cables are configured properly. Set the handlebar down into the stem. Put the stem cap back on. Start the bolts by hand. You never want to cross thread these. We'll get them to where they just start to touch. Then we can adjust our handlebar where we want it, roughly. All final adjustments will be done once the bike hits the floor. Just hold it in place for now. I'm going to change angles so you can see the front end, because I'm going to adjust the brake pads a little bit because they're facing the wrong way right now. And then we'll try and get the front wheel in. All right, so we're going to untie our cable. We're going to tuck it through over here, get it out of the way. As you can see, the brake pads are set from the factory in a funky position. We're going to use our 5mm Allen. And we're just going to try and get them in the ballpark. We don't really want to be able to get this super straight until the wheel is in, but the wheel won't go in right if we don't have the pads at least leveled out. We're going to find our way to somewhat balance them. Then we can disconnect our brake bail, squeeze our lever, put our pill up into the brake lever itself. We're going to turn our adjuster barrel to where the slot is lined up and the cable can glide through. Tighten down our locking nut. Now we're going to put our front wheel in. Loosen up the bolts. On this one they put the lawyer tab backwards, so we got to turn it around. And slide this into the frame. And put that lawyer tab on backwards too. Make sure your lawyer tab goes on first and the washer goes on after it. Otherwise, when you tighten down the axle nut, it's going to try and turn that lawyer tab. We call them lawyer tabs because it's a washer with a tang on it that holds the wheel into the frame, and I guess it saves the bike companies some serious lawsuits. Of our 15mm, we're going to tighten down the axle nuts. We're going to make sure the wheel is straight in the frame. We're going to use the center of the tread and line it up with the hole in the fork, or at least evenly space the wheel on either side in the fork. Before we go ahead and adjust the brakes, we're going to inflate the tire to 60 psi, 65. Make sure the back one's inflated because the rim will expand when the tire's inflated. And if you have your brake set to the rim before it's expanded, when you expand it, it's going to be dragging. So we're going to make sure that everything is inflated. We're going to make sure that the wheel is straight, that the brakes are balanced. Once we close the brake system back again, then we'll be able to adjust the pads. You can check this with a pressure gauge. Obviously, I've been doing this a long time. I know when it's pretty much as full as it's gonna get. Firm, not hard. That's how we like to say it. You don't want these things rock hard because they will blow off the rim, but you do want them pretty firm. All right, so let's see. We still need to let off some of the tension on the cable. Slide back our dust boot. Get that into the stirrup. Put our boot back on. That kind of holds it in place a little bit better. Our little spring just tucks behind the armature there. As you can see, the brake pad is definitely not in line with the frame. So we're going to force the arm over. Make sure there's enough gap at the top and the bottom, but you don't want the pad hanging off the bottom of the rim. Get it as parallel to the rim as you can. Make sure it's not touching the tire. Do the same to the other side. Now we can pull our cable through. And you want it to have just a little bit of back and forth. You want to feel it hit and hit and hit. You want that gap, just a little. You can see this side needs to be tensioned a little bit more. So we're going to take our Phillips head screwdriver and turn in on the adjuster screw here. And we will have to true our rim a little bit because it is not perfectly straight. But make sure that both arms move evenly when you pull on the cable. And then we will touch up the rim to make sure that it's straight. We're going to be using our spoke wrench. We're going to be looking for the gap. You can see there's more gap here, so we're going to use this spoke on the outside here to pull the rim over a little bit, put a little tension on it. And it doesn't need much, just a touch. You can hear where it hits. You're going to go to the opposite side and pull the rim over just a little bit. And now it's not touching. Even though the tire is a little wonky, they do come that way from the factory. They're not 100% perfect. Making sure that there's enough pressure in it will definitely correct some of that problem. We're going to put our cable crimp on the end so that it doesn't fray. Even though they are pre-soldered, just crimp it on and tuck it behind the brake arm so that it's out of the way. All right, nice and smooth, good braking. You can see by how much I pull on the lever before it makes contact. You don't want this thing bottoming out to the grip. And we should be good to go there. Now, so you may not be able to see it from that angle, but the brake pad itself, the tail of the pad is touching the rim. The front is gapped considerably. So we're going to loosen that up. We're going to push the arm up against as tight as it'll go. We're going to get that brake pad put directly in the center of the rim surface, the braking surface. So what we're looking for is for the pad to hit the rim flush and evenly. Not sure you can see that from there, but take my word for it. It's now hitting nice and even front and back, and it's on the same plane as the braking surface on the rim. We're going to do the same thing to the other side, and then we will adjust our cable tension. Yep, this one's set up the same way. The back of the pad is trailing. And when the brake pads are set right, it actually gives a much more positive braking feel. Our rim seems to be in good shape. Now we'll just add a little more tension. Tuck our cable. And of course, we will adjust our rim to make sure that it's trued so that it slides between the brake pads evenly. From here, we're going to go ahead and put the pedals on. Now we're going to unwrap our pedals. We're going to put a little grease on the spindles. Just a little bit, just enough to keep them from rusting into the frame. They are marked with an R and an L. Right side is on this side. You're going to start your pedals by hand. Get those threads to mate on their own. Make sure that these little sandpaper stickers that they have, you see how this one's a little crooked? Press them down good. When you reach through the frame, same thing with the stickers here, make sure they're on good. You're still going to be turning in a clockwise motion because they are opposite threads of each other. So you're going to start it clockwise. Once it's mated with the threads, you can put your pedal wrench on it, pedal backwards, and you can either hold the wheel and pull down, or you can hold the crank and pull down. Holding onto the wheel, when you pull on it, it's putting tension on the chain. It also tightens the freewheel, which is not necessarily a bad thing. I also recommend making sure you have a proper pedal wrench for this. Trying to do this with a 15mm wrench can be a bit of a challenge. This has a lot more leverage. It has dual angles, so you can get to your pedals better, and it's much more efficient to use an actual pedal wrench. So from here, we're going to put the reflectors on. Then we're going to test the gears, make sure that everything works in the drivetrain. Then we'll take her down, get her all adjusted, make sure that the handlebars are in line with the frame, that the seat's at the right angle, get it all dialed in. Then we're going to take it for a test ride, make sure that everything works properly, it goes through the gears, it stops when it's supposed to, and this one should be pretty much ready for the sales room floor. Let's get the reflectors on. I always like to put the front reflector on the left side of the stem. This is what we consider street side. When you are riding your bike down the side of the road, cars should be passing on the left side. That's why we call it street side. Unless you live in Europe where you ride on the other side of the road. With our rear reflector, we're going to set it up at a pretty harsh angle because the seat is at an angle, and we want this thing to be completely vertical once the bike is on the ground. So we set it up with a little bit of a pre-angle to it, up and over. Then we'll go ahead and put it on the post. Nothing is final until it's set, but all the little tips and tricks to get you to where you're not going to have to make 50 adjustments once it's down on the floor. We're going to leave it in the forward position because we still need to get to this bolt to adjust the seat angle once she's down. So now let's go ahead and check our gears. Drop her all the way down to 7th. She is a little hesitant getting there. We're going to check to see that the derailleur is pulling over far enough and that the cable tension is right. We're going to move the camera to do that. So there are a high and low adjustment screw. That's what stops the derailleur from coming out past the high gear and what stops the chain from going into the spokes on the low gear. So H is the small one, L is the big one. We're going to back off on the high just a little bit because I think the chain is trying to get up into second gear. Just a little bit of an adjustment, and then we're going to put the cable back in just a little bit. Now when we click one click on the shifter, should go right into gear. You should be able to see that the chain is completely centered between the chain rings. I'll try to zoom in for you so you can see that a little better. All right, so it looks like the chain still wants to lean towards that side. We're going to put just a little less tension on it. All right, so now that we've got the gears adjusted, the brakes are good, the tires are inflated, the rims are straight, the pedals are installed, handlebars are on, seats on, reflectors are on, all the parts are together. So now we're going to take her down and we're going to look at the seat angle. We want this to be as level as possible, which I think we're in pretty good shape there. So we're going to just tighten down this bolt because we didn't finalize it when we put it together. You definitely don't want the seat changing angle while you're riding it. And we can turn our reflector around and make sure it's vertical, straight up and down. We'll drop our seat post down a little bit. Make sure the seat is in line with the frame. You can see I'm doing a little balancing act here. You don't want to go crazy, but make sure it's good and tight, doesn't turn. Now we're going to adjust our handlebar. We're going to make sure that she's straight in the frame. Looks good. We are going to drop her down a little bit more. And what I generally do is I line up the stem bolt to the cap bolts to the front of the tire tread. I make a straight line like aiming a gun. Tighten that down and use the leverage to really lock it down because you definitely don't want that turning. Like so. Make sure our handlebars are at the right angle, that they're comfortable. Lock these down. Most important, you definitely don't want the handlebars going down or up while you're riding. Brakes are good. We'll put our tag on it. We have created a tag for this. And she's ready for sale. I definitely hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope that you like, share, subscribe, all the usual stuff. We're going to be coming out with as many of these as we can possibly crank out in the next year. And yeah, I hope you guys have a great day.